What's up, Internet? Cory Zamier here, collecting with Cory. It's time to take a look at my very small, minuscule, 11-game Sega Dreamcast collection. Let's go. Alright, one thing you guys should know, at one point in this channel's career, history, whatever you want to call it, I had intentions of getting a complete Sega Dreamcast collection. This was actually before CJR, before... who else was going for one? Gamer Emporium? Gamer Emporium, you were trying for one at one point. This was before either of them. I just got nowhere with it. I was just picking up whatever Dreamcast games I didn't have, but I didn't have resources or anything, like, and you don't really come across Sega Dreamcast games in the wild very often. So despite the fact that it's a very small library of games, seeing as the system only was around for, what, 2 solid years, if that, maybe less, I'm not even sure. You don't come across them very often, and if you don't have connections, avenues of getting games other than in the wild, you're kind of what the fuck out of luck. So, with that said, my Sega Dreamcast collection could be much bigger. It just isn't, because I kind of have it currently distilled down to the games that I really just want in my collection. Like, for instance, first up we have Chuchu Rocket. So the game I used to play on a demo kiosk in Toyworks, KB Toyworks, where my mom used to work. And I used to also work there at one point, but that was well after the fact. And to be honest, most of the games in this collection I've played, with the exception of 2 of them. Which is also a weird thing, is I've played most of my Dreamcast games. If you guys have been watching my collection videos up until this point, you'll know my history of actually playing the games in my collection is not not very often do I actually get to play the games in my collection. So it's very small for a good reason, because they're the games that I actually play. Next up we have 2 games, Crazy Taxi 1 and 2. And I believe I played Crazy Taxi 1 more back in the day. I feel like Crazy Taxi 2, when you play it at the beginning, you're playing like the same exact level as Crazy Taxi 1. Let me know in the comments below if I'm right about that. I feel like that's something I remember from playing this back in the day. Next up, we have Dead or Alive 2. Original Dead or Alive was on the PlayStation. They improved upon it with Dead or Alive 2 on the Dreamcast. Wonderful fighting game, albeit very bouncy. Evolution, one of the 2 games in my collection that I have not played. This is an RPG, just haven't had the chance to play it. And honestly, if I were looking for an RPG, I don't know if Evolution would be the one I would go with, especially that I don't have a Sega Dreamcast set up anywhere. Next up we have Plasma Sword. I lied. I guess there are 3 games in my collection I haven't played. This one I actually got possibly most recently out of all my Dreamcast games. I got this for a very good deal at a game exchange down south, in Connecticut still, but down south in Connecticut. Fighting game, not very well reviewed, but kind of pricey. I think I got it for about half of what it was going for. The most expensive game in my Dreamcast collection, and probably like one of my top 5 most expensive games in my collection, Project Justice. Fighting game that is the successor, or the sequel, to Rival Schools on the PlayStation 1. I'm not sure why they had to change the name, why they couldn't just call it Rival Schools 2, maybe it was a PlayStation thing, I don't know. But absolutely wonderful Capcom fighting game. Goes for around $100 last time I checked, and I was able to get this at a garage sale back in the day, probably like Season 1 of Collecting with Cory, or I guess even Weekend Adventure and Video Game Hunting. Season 1 of Weekend Adventure and Video Game Hunting for, I think it was like $1.40 or $1.60, like that's what the math worked out to. I got it with a whole bunch of other Dreamcast games and PlayStation 1 fighting games. That was actually one of my best pickups, and goddamn, I wish I could have pickups like that again. This is the last game in my Dreamcast collection that I have not played. Silver. It is a, I would call it a Diablo-like, based on what I'm looking at on the back. Kind of a Diablo-like RPG. Let me know in the comments below if it's worth playing. I actually have the strategy guide for it randomly. Got this at a garage sale from another collector that's pretty local, and I got a pretty good deal on it from what I remember. One of the absolutely best fighting games in the history of fighting games, I would actually wager to guess. Soul Calibur on the Dreamcast. This was a system seller. Sonic Adventure was not a system seller, in my opinion. That's why I don't have any of the Sonic Adventure games in my collection. I'm not a big fan of them. At the time, it seemed really cool to play Sonic in 3D, and after that, like, hype wore off. There wasn't much game left, in my opinion. Soul Calibur, however, very deep fighting game, very fun fighting game, uses weapons, ring outs, probably one of the best 3D fighters that has ever been made. This is the game that actually caused me to get a Sega Dreamcast. Back before I started the channel, before I started collecting, I was looking at some lists on IGN or something like that, or somehow someone mentioned this to me some way back when I was really into anime and watching Berserk and watching all these other anime and reading manga, and it was just like, wait a minute, there's a Berserk video game, Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage for the Sega Dreamcast? And I immediately went out and like shit $120 on a Sega Dreamcast in the box at a convention at Kineticon, like one of the first years I went, and immediately ran to eBay, purchased this. I think I played it a couple times and never again, because this game is really tough in that they're not really faithful to the show. Like, as you can tell, or possibly tell, based on the screenshots on the back. As you can probably tell from the screenshots on the back, Guts in this game, the main character, wields a gigantic sword. In the anime and in the manga, he doesn't have any problems with hitting walls with said sword, and thus getting his ass kicked by regular generic enemies. In this game, that happens all the time, because you're constantly swinging your sword and it's getting like, oh, it hit the wall, it hit this tree, it hit this chair, and it's just like, oh, I got my ass kicked because these other enemies have realistically sized weapons and don't have to deal with these problems. And the last game, and to be honest, my most played Sega Dreamcast game, Toy Commander. Absolutely loved playing this. I think I've talked about this so many times. Absolutely loved playing this. Used to play this against random people in KB Toy Works back in the day when I was like, when did this game come out? '99. So I would have been like 11, 12 years old. I was just playing randoms that would come up to me wanting to play the Sega Dreamcast kiosk that was in KB Toy Works, and I would school them because, well, they didn't know what they were doing and I'd been playing the game all day. But one of my first experiences of actually being pretty good at a game. Toy Commander, you're basically a small little toy. You go in the single player and do like a whole bunch of missions where you have to find a whole bunch of stuff, eliminate certain things depending on the mission. You could either be flying, a car, some other sort of vehicle. Absolutely wonderful game, very fun game, and I would highly recommend it. As far as what games I would like to get, or a game I would most want for the Sega Dreamcast, I'd have to go with something that's really expensive. Like, I've heard a lot of good things about Cannon Spike, And the fact that it has a whole bunch of Capcom characters just kind of mashed up into a game, it sounds like it's a lot of fun. The Let's Plays I've seen of it make it look like it would be a lot of fun. It's the price tag that is really prohibitive for me. It's over $100 from what I remember, and I ain't dropping that kind of Skrilla on it, so maybe if I can get lucky and find it for cheap somewhere. Not very likely, as it's a pretty rare game, but then again, I did find Project Justice for $1.60, so let me know in the comments below what games I should be looking for. Let me know how you like the lighting in this video. I'm doing a little bit something different. We'll see how it goes. Basically trying to switch it up in most of these collection videos to kind of see how you're liking these setups. I'm not really settled on any particular pickup showing setup or anything like that. Really trying to work on the lighting in this room because it is not as good as it used to be back at my mom's house. I just can't figure out the lighting here, guys. I'm close. This video might not be as close as I've been, but let me know in the comments below. Anyways, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and as always, keep it real, Internet. I love you guys.